Welcome back to another episode of Opalwave MTG, a channel dedicated to exploring power levels in EDH and helping you tune your deck to your meta. I'm your host Jacob, and today we're going to be looking at Marneus Calgar, which is an Esper, white, blue, and black Astartes warrior with double strike. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card, pay 6, create 2/2 white Astartes warrior creature tokens with vigilance. Super sweet commander, a lot you can do with it. You can do more token type builds, you can use it as an infinite mana outlet, which you'll see in the glory version. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you did with your version of Marneus Calgar, and my Discord should be up and running as of this video, so check out the description below and join. I look forward to building a really great community with all of you, people that have subbed, people that haven't subbed. Join the server, let's have a good game, a good time, and play some good games. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So for the Skirmish version of Marneus Calgar, which is, our lowest power level, I decided to go with a food, treasure, and clue tribal deck. So all three of these tokens that have been kind of pushed over the years by wizards, we're going to jam all three of those types into this deck. And what a better creature to add than Academy Manufacturer, which says whenever you create a food, clue, or a treasure token, instead create one of each. And then throughout the deck, we've got a bunch of cards that can either create clues, they can make treasures, or they can utilize food or even make food. Some interesting outlets for the deck are Disciple of the Vault. Whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from play, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. And then we've got the Marionette Master, which whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So you can either make it a 4/6, or you can just leave it as a 1/3. If you make it bigger, it's obviously going to do way more damage. We've also got a few other fun includes like Inquisitor Greyfax, which does investigate, as well as the Necron Overlord, which has tap X untapped artifacts you control. Target opponent loses X life. So an additional way for us to utilize all the artifact tokens that we'll be making. And an Inquisitor Eisenhorn, which also allows you to investigate. So a lot of really cool cards from the pre-con that we can use in this deck. In addition to the other cards that over the years have just been able to make these different types of tokens. So moving on, we've got the sorceries. So Grim Bounty, destroy target creature planeswalker, make a treasure token. Late for dinner, you get to reanimate something, you're going to create a food token. You're probably seeing a trend here. We've got Launch the Fleet, which doesn't really make any of those 3 tokens. It just makes a bunch of tokens if we're trying to swing in for a win. We've also got this Pirate's Prize, good card advantage, makes treasures. Vanquish the Horde, basically a white Blasphemous Act. Card super sweet, really decent board wipe. And we've also got a Rise and Shine, another way for us to turn all those clues, treasures, and food into 4/4 beat sticks. So you can either make one creature a 4/4, or you can overload this and make all of them 4/4s. So a great way for us to close out games with this. In our instant package, we've got Bake into a Pie, which is more removal. It's going to make a food token for us. Confirm Suspicion, which is going to investigate 3 times when we counter something. Disorder in the Court can help protect our boards, and at the same time, it will investigate. Expose Evil, more. It's tapping at 2 creatures, so if people go to combat and you need to stop them from swinging at you specifically, you can use this to do that. You also get to investigate. Hornswoggle can counter creatures and you make a treasure. Just some general removal too, like Mortify, Utter End. Then we've also got stuff like Spell Swindle. I really like this card. You don't get to play it too often, so when you do, I try to put it in there. Since you will make X treasure tokens, where X is the converted mana cost or mana value of the spell that you countered. So a lot of really cool stuff here. Moving on to our artifacts, a mix of 2 and 3 cost ramp, as well as stuff like Hedron Archive. We've got a Tamio's Journal, which allows us to investigate at the beginning of our upkeep. And when when we're making these foods, the treasures, and the clues, we're going to be triggering Marneus, who is going to draw a card every time we do this. So Marneus ends up being a really good outlet for this. Marneus also has double strike, so using stuff like Gold Vein Pick, Giant Skewer, and Prying Blade get a little bit of extra value when we put them on Marneus and start swinging at players, since when these three things, these equipment, so whenever the equipped creature deals damage, you get to create a food token. So essentially, you'll do the first strike damage, you'll make a food or a treasure, and then you'll hit the second time and you will do it again. So double the value, really good. Then we've also got, Gilded Pinions, which can make Marneus, give Marneus flying, and it'll also make a treasure when it enters the battlefield. Unstable Obelisk, a little bit extra removal. Witch's Oven, we can sacrifice creatures to make food, which is really convenient with our Cauldron Familiar, where you could sack a food and return Cauldron Familiar from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can sack the Cauldron Familiar, make a food, sack the food, bring Cauldron Familiar back. We don't really have a way to like untap Witch's Oven or go infinite with it. It's just some good mid-range value. In our enchantments, we've got Agent of the Iron Throne. Another way for us to get extra advantage with our commander. When the artifacts hit the graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life. Search the Premise. Whenever we attack, we're going to make, or not when we attack, whenever an opponent attacks us, we're going to make clues. Thorough Investigation. This is the one where when we attack, we get to investigate, and then whenever we sack a clue, we get to venture into the dungeon. Chill of Evidence is also really sweet. Since you'll cast your instant sorcery spells and you get to make an additional clue, which will trigger Marneus, and you will get to draw an additional card. And then we've got this Antiquities of War, which on the final tick, artifacts you control become artifact creatures with base power and toughness 5/5. So another way for us to close out games, much like the Rise and Shine. Moving on to our lands, a really simple land base. We got lands that can enter tapped, lands that can enter untapped, just so we can, make sure we hit our colors. Not too big of a deal in terms of, trying to race right out the gate, since we are playing in that lower power level. And moving on to the battle version of Marneus Calgar. And we're going to move away from a themed token deck, and we're going to move closer towards a more synergistic token deck, where we'll be able to, really generate tokens, and then those tokens will just generate more value, and so on. We've got 2 Planeswalkers in the deck, Elspeth Sun's Champion and a Liliana Dreadhorde General, which both have an uptick of making a token, which will draw us at a card with Marneus. They can both serve as removal. Elspeth's -3, destroy creature's power 4 or greater, which is really convenient because Marneus is a 3/5. Then we've also got the Liliana, which -4 makes each player sacrifice 2 creatures, and the ultimate is also pretty much game ending. And the Elspeth Sun Champion ultimate, while not game ending, it can definitely make our board very lethal. It also makes Marneus a flying 5/7. You can definitely, start 3-shotting people with that. Moving on to our creatures, we got a little bit of value, stuff like Archivist of Ogma. Monastery Mentor is super sweet, since whenever you cast an on-creature spell, you're going to create a 1/1 white monk, and from there you get to draw an extra card. Nadir Kraken, also a very sweet card in this deck, since whenever you draw a card, you can pay 1. If you do, you put a counter on the Kraken, and then you make an additional 1/1 blue tentacle creature token, which will then trigger Marneus again, and then you get to draw a card, which then from there you get to trigger Nadir again, and from there you get to make another 1/1 blue tentacle creature token. So if you have an Ashnod's Altar where you sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless mana, you can potentially draw most of your deck. So from here, you'll sacrifice one of your 1/1 blue tentacle creature tokens to pay the 1 mana when you draw the card. And the blue tentacle will pay for, by sacrificing it, you make 2 colorless. So then you can use the 2 colorless to pay the next 2 draw triggers that you get off the Nadir Kraken. So you get to save one of the Krakens every time you do that loop. A really cool way to just kind of rip through your deck and potentially just make a really big army. Battle Angels of Tyr has Myriad. So when you swing with the creature with Myriad, you make a token of each for each opponent that it's not attacking. And because you're making tokens, Marneus will draw an additional card off of that. Super sweet. We've added an Aphara, which has some really nice synergy with stuff like the Nadir Kraken, potentially the Monastery Mentor, and Talrand. Fairy Artisans, and also a really sweet one. So whenever a creature enters under our opponent's control, we get to make a token of that creature. And from there, we're going to trigger our Marneus. So just a lot of really good value off of the Fairy Artisans. Grave Titan can also generate some good value when it enters as well as when it's attacking. Grim Hireling has some really good synergy as well with Marneus since he has Double Strike. And Grim Hireling says whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player. So if you want to maximize the value on Grim Hireling, you need to hit 3 different players at the same time. But because of Marneus, because of his Double Strike, you're going to hit once, you're going to trigger Grim Hireling, and then you will hit him again with that Double Strike damage, and you'll trigger Grim Hireling again. So you can potentially make 8 treasures in one turn if you hit all 3 opponents, plus the Double Strike trigger on Marneus. So really sweet. We've got the Ginger Taxius, which while it hinders our opponent's first instant sorcery or artifacts, it's going to copy our artifact spells, and those will enter as a token. And because of that, we get to draw a card with Marneus. So a really good synergy. Then we've also got Tivit, who has a lot of text, but essentially you're either going to investigate or create a treasure token depending on how your opponents vote as well as yourself. And this also is another infinite combo we can do with this with the Time Sieve. So essentially sacrifice 5 artifacts and take an extra turn after this one. And Tivit says while voting, you can vote an additional time. So essentially, you're going to vote twice. Your opponents will vote, and if you have at least 3 opponents, they'll give you 3 tokens. And from there, you can sacrifice the 5 tokens you just made with Tivit to take an extra turn. When Tivit swings, you can do that again, where you're going to make 5 more tokens. These will all be triggering Marneus. You only get 1 draw trigger because they're all going to enter at the same time. But you still get to draw a card, activate your Time Sieve, and take another turn. From there, you can take infinite turns. So a really sweet combo with this deck. Moving on to our sorceries, we've got Awaken the Erstwhile, which makes each player discard all the cards in their hand, and each player makes a 2/2 black zombie creature token for each card they discarded. And Marneus, so when everyone's going to discard cards, and then you're only going to get 1 draw trigger. But from there, hopefully you have another way to make tokens, especially since Marneus just has the ability to pay 6, make 2 tokens. And from there, you can just start generating value and outvalue the table. And so yeah, it's a really great way to really slow down your opponents, hinder their game plan, while you get to kind of just drive ahead with the inherent card advantage on your commander. Some tutors like Demonic Tutor and a Fabricate. We've added Martial Coup as an additional board wipe potentially, and a Vanquish the Horde. We've still got this card in the deck. Moving on to our instants, we have definitely upgraded our instant package. It's not really about making clues, treasures, and food anymore. It's more just getting rid of permanents on the board that are problematic. We've got stuff like Teferi's Protection, which can help protect our board as well. A little bit extra tutor power with the Enlightened Tutor and the Vampiric Tutor, as well as Tails End, Disallow that can help deal with triggered abilities. Moving on to our artifacts. We've definitely made some really good upgrades here. We're not really doing any of the 3 mana ramp anymore. We got pretty much all the 2 and the 2 mana ramp plus the Soul Ring. We've also added a Mimic Vat, which is a really great way for us to seal our opponent's creatures, as well as just we get to make a token, which will trigger Marneus. We've got Shurikei Genesis Engine, since it's going to be a really good draw engine. Since we get to draw 2 cards, we'll discard a card, and then we get to make a 1/1 pilot creature token, which will trigger Marneus. And then from there, we get to draw an additional card. So essentially for 1 mana and tapping Shurikei, we're going to draw 3 cards and discard a card. So a really good value engine in this deck. We've also added the Sword of the Meek plus Thopter Foundry combo. And if you're not familiar with how this combo works, we are going to use the Ashnod's Altar again. So essentially, we are going to sacrifice Sword of the Meek to Thopter Foundry. And from there, we are going to make a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature with flying, and we're going to gain 1 life. And when that happens, it's going to trigger Sword of the Meek whenever a 1/1 creature comes into play under your control. you may return Sword of the Meek from your graveyard to play, then attach it to that creature. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use Ashnod's Altar, and we're going to sacrifice the 1/1 that we just made to make 2 colorless mana. We're going to use the one of the colorless mana, and we're going to sacrifice Sword of the Meek to make a 1/1. So from here, you have 1 colorless floating, and every time you loop this, you're going to generate 1 additional mana, and from there, you can potentially make an infinite amount of 1/1s. So pretty sweet interaction there. And moving on to the enchantments, we've got the Anointed Procession, which will double the amount of tokens we make. We've got a Bitter Blossom, which will make a token for us at the beginning of our upkeep. So essentially, we are going to be drawing an extra card with Marneus off of that triggered ability. We've also got the Black Market Connection, which can make a treasure, let us draw an extra card, as well as make a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter. We've also got Call of the Bloodline, which has pay 1, discard a card, make a 1/1 Black Vampire Knight creature token. You can only use the ability once each turn though, so when you discard a card, you're going to make the token, and then because of Marneus, you're going to draw a card, which then you can use the card you just drew on the next turn to discard it, make another 1/1, and from there, you'll just be able to kind of filter through your deck essentially once each turn, especially once you get something like a Divine Visitation out. You're essentially paying 1 mana to make a 4/4 white angel creature token. Speaking of efficient angels, we've also added this Luminarch Ascension, which we can eventually just pay 2 mana and create a 4/4 white angel creature token as long as we don't lose life for 4 turns. Then we've also got the Ominous Seas. We'll be drawing a good bit of cards in this deck. So we can essentially remove the 8 counters, make an 8/8, which will then draw us another card. And from there, we only need to draw 7 more cards before the Ominous Sea can be activated again. We've got a Smothering Tithe, which is super sweet in this deck. So essentially, if your opponents don't pay 2 when they draw a card, they are now making you a treasure and drawing you a card because of Marneus' trigger ability. So a really powerful card in general, but in this context, super, super sweet. We've kept the Trail of Evidence. I think this card is it's a lot of value. And we've added a Training Grounds to make Marneus' ability 4 instead of 6. In the lands, pretty straightforward upgrades. We've added on-color fetch lands. We've added on-color shock lands. Just in general, more lands that have the potential to enter the battlefield untapped, allow us to play on curve a little bit easier, but nothing too crazy. We've also got this Academy Ruins, which can return important artifacts from our graveyard to our library, top of our library essentially, so pretty decent. And before I move on to the glory version of Marneus Calgar, if you've enjoyed this video and you feel like you've gained a little bit more perspective on power levels in EDH, then go ahead and like, subscribe, and leave a comment letting me know what you did with your version of the commander and what commander you want me to see brew next. Definitely interested in hearing all the comments that you guys have, and I really appreciate it. So for the glory version of Marneus Calgar, we are going to utilize Marneus as an infinite mana outlet essentially. Some really cool stuff we can do with this commander. We have added, just like the last video, we get to do Displacer Kitten shenanigans. So if we've got this Teferi Time Reveler, which has -3, return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand. Then you get to draw a card. So with Displacer Kitten, Teferi, and the Mana Crypt, you're going to draw your entire library, or at least most of it, depending on how you're going to win the game from there. You'll cast a Mana Crypt, you will flicker your Teferi, and then you can minus the Teferi to return the Mana Crypt to your hand, and you'll draw a card. Then you get to tap your Mana Crypt, or play your Mana Crypt again, flicker the Teferi, and because you're flickering it every time, it's going to reset and go back to 4 counters, and you can keep returning the Mana Crypt back to your hand and drawing a card. And from there, you can either win with like a Thassa's Oracle, or we can do Time Twister loops, which we can get into that in just a minute. So we've added some really great staples in the deck. Since we're doing more of a mid-range type strategy here. We've got an Ad Naz in the deck, but it's not really a turbo Naz deck. You generally want to like Naz at the in step before your turn, as opposed to like doing main phase Nazes. Very, very mid-range type of deck. We want to grind out value and then, you know, attempt our wins when it's going to be pretty protected. We've got some stuff like Dothy, Dranith, Gilded Drake, where we can disrupt our opponents while we are advancing our own game plan. We've got the Ledger Shredder, which is really great for just generating card advantage. A Sarah Ascendant, so we can pressure other decks with Adnaz and potentially just protect our own. Since we are playing black on our colors, you will generally be the first person that players swing at in general. So using the Sarah Ascendant to kind of buffer your life total can be really important. We've still got the Grim Hireling, which is great at controlling our opponent's boards, as well as triggering Marneus, as we talked about in the battle version. We've got the Hullbreaker Horror, since it is really good at potentially generating a ton of mana. We're not really doing like Reanimator shenanigans in this deck, so generally you're going to be hard casting the Hullbreaker Horror, but it's still an uncounterable creature that will generally just win you the game when it resolves. So Monastery Mentor is still in the deck, as well as stuff like Ranger Captain, Grand Abolisher, so we can protect our combos like I was talking about before. And we've also got the Thassa's Oracle, which can win us the game once we have drawn out our entire library. And because of that, we also have the Demonic Consultation plus Tainted Pact. Moving on to our sorceries, we've got the Dam, which can be pretty modal in terms of destroying a creature, or we can overload it and destroy all creatures. I highly recommend the creature meta right now can be pretty creature heavy, so you know, it's always good to at least have like one board wipe. If your meta is not very creature heavy, you could probably swap out Dam for a different card and just a flex slot, but considering the amount of creatures running around the format right now, I think Dam is a very good include. Got some really great tutors: Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent, Grim Tutor, Imperial Seal, all really great for helping us find our combos. We got a Taxian Probe, which can help look at our opponent's hand. If we think they have interaction or something like that, we'll know if we can go for it or not. And a Praetor's Grasp, which is going to be very important for, you know, disrupting specific decks. But we can also just use it as a win condition. And finally, we've got this Time Twister. So Time Twister is going to be one of the ways we can win the game. So let's actually go to our play tester right now. So let's have Marneus on board, and let's just assume that we have created infinite mana, whether it's with like a Displacer Kitten loop or Hullbreaker Horror, returning our artifacts to our hand and generating infinite mana. So now we gotta ask ourselves, how are we winning? Let's say we've attempted a Thassa's Consultation already, and for some reason our Thassa's Oracle is in exile due to like a Dothy Boardwalker or something like that. So in order for us to win the game, we're going to draw our entire, well, most of our deck. We're going to draw a good portion of it. And remember, we have infinite mana at this point. So we're going to find our Time Twister. We got our Time Twister here. And then we are also eventually going to draw a Narset's Reversal. So what we're going to do here is we are going to cast our Time Twister, and then with Time Twister on the stack, we're going to cast a Narset's Reversal targeting our Time Twister. So what's going to happen here is Narset's Reversal is going to make a copy of Time Twister. Our original Time Twister is going to come back to our hand, and then our Narset's Reversal is going to go to our graveyard before the copy of Time Twister resolves. So now we have a copy of Time Twister on the stack, and this is going to resolve. So Time Twister is going to make each player shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library, and each player will draw 7 cards. So now your Time Twister and your Narset's Reversal are back in your library. From this point, you can draw out your deck again, cast your Time Twister, cast the Narset's Reversal, and then you have now established a Time Twister loop. So once you are in this Time Twister loop, we are now going to win with either one of 2 cards. So we've got the Praetor's Grasp, which is something that I alluded to earlier. And then we've also got, now that I'm thinking of the card, yep, here it is. It is Reality Shift. So either one of these cards from this point on is going to allow you to win the game. So essentially with Praetor's Grasp, we can search our opponent's library for a card, and put it into exile. We can cast it for the rest of the game. So with this, we are just going to exile our opponent's libraries, because once we cast the Praetor's Grasp, it's going to go to our graveyard, and then when we Time Twister plus Narset's Reversal, that's going to shuffle the Praetor's Grasp back into our deck. We can draw the Praetor's Grasp again, and from there, we can cast it again. Then we've also got this Reality Shift, which says exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of his or her library. So as long as each opponent has one creature on board, they will you'll exile the creature, and then they are going to manifest. So we'll take the top card of the library and they'll put it on the battlefield. From this point, you're going to put, Reality Shift goes to your graveyard. You're going to Time Twister it back, and from this point, you can cast Reality Shift, targeting the card that they just manifested. And from this point, you're going to exile their entire library, because you'll exile the creature, they'll manifest. You exile the creature, they'll manifest. Repeat the process until no opponent has libraries anymore. Now, if there's a really weird situation where you don't have a Praetor's Grasp and you don't have a Reality Shift for some weird reason, and you don't have your Thassa's Oracle, there is another way that you can potentially win the game. So what you're going to do is you are going to make infinite mana. You're going to draw all but, let's say, the top 3 cards of your library. Maybe the top 4, depending on if an opponent can force you to draw with like a Cephalid Coliseum or something like that. So you got to make sure, pay attention to your opponent's lands or any effects that can, cause forced draws. So essentially what we'll do is we'll draw a good majority of our deck, and then from there we are going to activate Marneus a bunch of times. We are going to, once we have like a billion Marneus triggers on the stack, what we can do is we can essentially use a removal spell targeting Marneus before the trigger or before his abilities resolve. So once you swords Marneus, he won't be on the battlefield anymore. You'll make 5 million 2/2s, and they won't trigger Marneus because he won't be on the battlefield anymore, and you won't have to draw any more cards. Now, because of this, you can basically sculpt the perfect hand, and you can also like Hullbreaker Horror and return everyone's creatures to all permanents your opponents control to their owner's hand. You can Time Twister, so then no one has anything on the battlefield except for permanents. You have a hand perfectly sculpted to just kind of wipe counter spells and whatnot to make sure that no one can do anything for an entire turn cycle. And then when you get to your turn, you will have 5 million 2/2s that you can just kill everybody with. So some pretty convoluted ways that you can win with an infinite mana outlet in the command zone, but because of this, you don't have to run a ton of like really dead cards outside of like maybe Narset's Reversal, which can have some really niche uses. Like maybe you can like target an opponent's Adnos, an opponent's Peer into the Abyss. So yeah, some pretty decent uses with the Narset's Reversal. So it's not completely dead outside of the combo, but it's also not like amazing outside of the combo. It can help protect some against some like counter magic and stuff like that. Moving on to our artifacts, we do have a bunch of our 0 drops and stuff like that to help enable the Displacer Kitten. We've also got this Isochron Scepter, since with the Dramatic Reversal, wherever it is, here we go. You put this underneath the Isochron Scepter, you pay 2 to activate the Scepter, you cast Dramatic Reversal, which is going to untap all of your non-land permanents, and as long as you have at least 3 mana in terms of, rocks, you will be able to produce infinite mana, and then from there you can start your Time Twister loops, you can draw out your deck, you can win with Thassa's Oracle, however you wish to win at that point. And then also a Wishclaw Talisman, which is just a really powerful tutor and can have some really funny interactions with Isochron Scepter if you really want to. Moving on to our enchantments, again we've got that Smothering Tithe, super strong with Marneus on the battlefield. Necropotence, really great for drawing us cards. Black Market Connection, which gives us just a ton of value, as well as the Mystic Remora and the Heuristic Study. Moving on to our lands. All of our lands at this point, as usual, are entering the battlefield untapped. We've got some really great utility in our lands, stuff like Iganjo, Odawara, Ancient Tomb, just to accelerate us a little bit faster. Our commander is 5 mana, and this will just basically cover the colorless or the generic costs on our commander. We also got the Urza Saga, which can help find some of our rocks, which is really important for the Displacer Kit and combos. But yeah, pretty straightforward upgrades here. You know, you can always proxy these things, Tundra, Underground Sea, if you're trying to play like online and stuff like that. But yeah, pretty straightforward. So yeah, thanks for checking out this episode of Opalwave MTG. I'm your host Jacob, and until next time.